All right, we'll get going here. Shane, welcome back to Artist Huddle number two. You're one of our favorites, so I thought it'd be fun to get you back and catch up since we're
Thanks,
missing our
Chris.
get together in Queenscliff. How are you doing?
Pretty good, as you can see. A little bit chilly this evening. It's supposed to be, midsummer, but we take it as it comes these days.
Exactly. Shane, you are so busy these days. For those who may not have met you yet or who are not up to speed, you're the director of the Evergreen Ensemble and you're creating programs and making recordings and you're researching a PhD and you're about to head off to Scotland. You're
Yeah.
teaching, among many other things.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure where to begin. What's been on your plate this week?
Um, well, this week, as part of my PhD, I've recorded 3 albums over the last 12 months. Well, I did 2 in March of last year and 1 in October. And this is the first time I've ever done so many albums in such a squishy period of time. And it is a bit of an eye-opener to just see how it is to juggle trying to actually physically make copies of 3 albums and get all the liner notes done and the artwork and whatnot. So I've wrapped up 1 album. I took it to the printers, so it's currently being printed as we speak, which is quite exciting, and that's a solo fiddle album. And as I tell you about the albums, I'll show you what I've done for the artwork because that's also been on my mind this week. So I'll just grab it from the ground over here. So I discovered that down the road from me in Geelong, there's somebody that does wet plate photography. It's like what 19th century style photography. So given that I'm studying 19th century music collections, Scottish Australian music collections, I thought it'd be fun to like take some images that kind of were a visual complement to the music making that I was doing. So this is me dressed up as one of the people whose music I'm playing with his violin and my little desk set up there with a quill. So that's become one of the album covers. And the other one, I'll just grab it. I
That's
just finished
amazing.
like I just finished like half an hour ago. So this is actually a second photo from that same photographer. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah.
That's like a wet plate photo. And then the name of the album is Winter Garden Fantasias because the man Robert Bailey, he came to far north Queensland in 1912, and so I wanted something that sort of captured like the sort of the fantastical side of bringing Scottish music to the tropics. So I wanted, 19th century style sort of versions of Australian animals. They always did little wallabies looking like this in the early days. Got a lyrebird, a cockatoo, an owl, a little Australian bee, possums, snakes, the Tasmanian tiger, and this is not Australian, the monarch butterfly, but I asked the pianist who accompanied me on the album what his totem animal would be, and he said monarch butterfly. So that's him painted
Of course,
in.
this is your own artwork.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So that's taken a little while to complete. But one of the things that I've been sort of reflecting on playing old music is that it's hard to come up with a good image to kind of complement the tunes. And so one way to get around that is to just create your own, which is the solution I've come up with.
I love it. I love it. There's so few people that have the scope of talents that you're applying to these projects. Now, with this one, just remind me, tell us a little bit about Bailey.
So he came from a long line of violinists. There are 4 generations of Bailey violinists. Most of them are named Robert. So I won't bother telling you, like trying to differentiate between them. And the earliest that we know of, he's a Pate Bailey, and he was around the same time as Neil Gow. Actually, I could play you the tune from the recording, which has a funny Neil Gow and Bailey anecdote attached to it, because in the Bailey collection that I'm studying, there are lots of examples of this Strathspey Bay, and it always has Pate Bailey written as the composer, and it's often noted, like Bailey actually published it himself in 1825, and he wrote that it was his Strathspey, but it was also published by Gow in the late 18th century in his own collection of tunes. And so there's one example of Pate Bailey's collection that's held in a little Scottish library, and someone in the 19th century has said, but it's not possible that this could be Pate's composition, because he would have been 10 years old at the time that Neil Gow collected it from him. But given that he was apparently prodigiously talented, he was just an incredibly virtuosic musician, it's actually not impossible at that time that at 10 he'd already come up with a Strathspey that Gow thought was worthy of his own collection. And their paths crossed later in life as well, when Gow was coming home late at night after playing at a penny wedding. This is how the story goes anyway. He came across someone seated at the side of the road, and the person asked for some snuff, and Gow said yes. And then the person jumped up and stole Neil Gow's violin off his back, and we all know that it was a beautiful violin. And even though he was quite elderly, he gave chase, and he caught the guy, and he, got his fiddle back, and he said, "Why'd you do that?" And it was Pate Bailey, and he said, "Well, I've become destitute. I've had to sell my violin. I've got nothing to feed my family with now. I can't play my violin." And Gow went to Bailey's house the next day and said, "Well, show me how you can play." And he played something splendid, and Gow got his job back at the orchestra and got him a fiddle, and it all ended happily ever after. So those
Wow,
are the two
amazing
anecdotes.
tale.
Yeah, and it's possible, because this is the wonderful thing. So I met Pate Bailey's, let's see, son, grandson, great-great-grandson, who's alive and grew up in the Blue Mountains where I lived. And when I met him, he gave me the family violin. This is the Bailey violin. It's a 1777 German violin. And so I like to think, even though there's no way I know this, I like to think that maybe this is the violin that Neil Gow gave to Pate Bailey. It's not impossible, but it is a stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
Well, let's play that one that I was talking about, the Bailey Strathspey.
Okay.
And I think I actually played it for you once, the Rachel Ray reel, at a Boxwood a couple of years ago, and very often the Baileys finish off the Bailey Strathspey with the Rachel Ray reel, which is a great reel in D that everyone should know, because it's just a cracker. So it's got gut strings, but metal wound gut strings, so it's a kind of a bit of a modernized version compared to what Pate Bailey would have been playing.
Amazing.
That's what Pate's grandson, that's how he ended the tune. It's a real kind of like,
On a high D.
yeah, very, very flourishy. So they wouldn't have done that back in Pate's day.
Yeah. Wow, fun. So this is one of the three CDs that you're making is the Bailey Focus
Uh,
CD?
yeah, there are two Bailey CDs. One's sort of like the solo repertoire. That's that the photo with the top hat. And in that album, I wanted sort of to have a little bit more of a creative sort of angle to exploring all of this solo repertoire. So I decided that I would play 8 different instruments. So I sort of tried to pair each piece with a violin that sort of brought something special to the interpretation of the piece. So I played, I'll show you. There's one piece from the Bailey collection that has drop D tuning. So I used this violin d'amore. A couple of Boxwood people would have already seen this. This is Dan Ross's instrument. It's a prototype that usually you hear about viola d'amores, but this is a violin d'amore. So it has the 4 strings that a violin normally has, and then 4 sympathetics that run under the fingerboard. And it's just a great instrument to play like scordatura on. So if you're not going to tune up your instrument G, D, A, E, the way that violinists normally do, you might tune it A, E, A, E, or G, D, G, D. So you've got like sort of an octave down lower, an octave down higher, but your fingering doesn't change. This is a great instrument to do it because you've got these little sympathetic strings, and they just make the whole instrument even more sort
Right.
of ring,
How is that
fuzzy.
different from a hardanger then?
Well, it's still got like a rounded bridge. So hardanger like often has quite a flat bridge, so it really encourages you to be playing lots and lots of double stopping all the time. Whereas this, it still allows you to sort of arpeggiate or to play as you would just a normal violin. So you don't have to play it in any way specific to this instrument. So I guess it's very similar. You can definitely play hardanger repertoire on this, but you can also play things that sound quite baroque or that sound modern.
Yeah. And is that the same kind of fiddle that Afric plays?
She had, I think she had a viola d'amore, but it was a 5-string with no sympathetic strings. I'm not sure. I don't think she had sympathetic strings. So, yeah,
Okay.
big versatile instruments that let you kind of think outside the box. But this, I can play the beginning of this piece because it's really interesting. Again, it's got a little story attached to it. So it has this drop D tuning. So you actually have to tune up the lower string. Sort of really, let's see, would it be as low as, it's as low as the D string on a cello.
Mm.
And it's used in this piece to sort of imitate the drones of a pipe. And so the piece is called The Rocking of the Cradle, and it's originally Irish, apparently, but the guy who wrote this down in the 19th century, he'd only ever heard his father and grandfather playing it. And the way that he described it being played by his dad is that his dad would get a key, the key to a lock for a door, and he would put the key in his mouth, and then he would rest the key on the bridge, and it makes like a little vibration. And written into the tune, there are like the sounds of a child that's kind of crying. And in a letter, he describes that you would put the key on the bridge, and then you would take it off using your teeth when you wanted it to sound like the child was saying "mum, mum." And when I was on holiday in a couple of weeks back, I found the perfect key. These huge keys. They're under they've been framed up by somebody. It must be their, an old keepsake. And I just have to disinfect them before I try this this technique. So I'll just play you a few lines from this piece without the keyed bit, and I recorded it without the key as well, just to kind of. I recorded the entire album in one day, so I had to keep it pretty simple to make sure that I, got it all in the can.
And this is produced by Pate Bailey again.
So Pate Bailey's grandson wrote it down and sent it to his son who was living in Australia.
Okay.
So, yeah. You kind of need two strings, so I only need to tune up the two.
Cool. That sounds like a little bit of Athol Highlanders in there.
Exactly, it does sound very much like that. I played it to Jeff, who you know from Boxwood in Australia, and that's what he said. I can see his little scribble on my score saying Athol Highlanders. So, but yeah, it's a tricky one to play on the fiddle, because anytime the melody goes sort of more than 5 notes high, you have to play everything sort of right up on one string. Otherwise, you lose your drone string.
Right, right.
Yeah, so that's the rocking of the cradle.
Oh, beautiful. Now, you are off to Scotland yourself shortly, aren't you?
Yes, in exactly a week.
Tell me about this trip and what your goals are.
So it's a research trip sponsored by the McGeorge Travelling Scholarship. I applied and was successful. So my aim is to dig up some of the treasures around the collections that I'm studying that I can't kind of access from Australia. So the three collections, obviously the Bailey collection, and I know from having already exchanged with a couple of historians in the place where they lived, that I'll be able to go and look at some notes that were made on the family by a local journalist who knew them personally. So I'm really looking forward to that, because now that I've been sort of sitting with this music for so long, you get to really feel as if you almost know these people personally. And yeah, I'm really dying to sort of find out a little bit more about who they were, because that really does change how you end up approaching the music afterwards. Um,
Is that the
and
National Library in Edinburgh?
what's that?
Are you going to be doing this research in Edinburgh primarily?
Uh, no, only a little bit of it will actually be in Edinburgh. So that will be in like a country library, that research, and then um, the one of the other collections belongs to a family from the Snowy Mountains, and Jill Findlay, harpist, who comes to Boxwood, Australia. This is her great grandfather's collection. And I haven't been able to find out a great deal about his life before he came to Australia. I know sort of a little bit, I know where he lived, and I'm going to go and meet up with another Scottish fiddler from the Shetlands, Katrina MacDonald. She teaches in Newcastle Uni, so I'm going to go down there and give a lecture with Nancy Kerr. I don't know if you know Nancy. She's a folk singer who comes to Australia really regularly, and do a concert with David McGuinness from Concerto Caledonia. And then Katrina's going to drive me through Dunfermline, the area where the Findlay family lived, sort of on the southern borderlands area. I would never be able to get there, I don't think, unless I had a friend like her to sort of take me there personally, because it really is quite an out of the way place, in terms of routes, driving routes. And then I'll be the third collection belongs to a man who came as a convict to Tasmania in 1813. So this is like the earliest collection. He was born in the late 18th century, and his connections are more in the northeast, so all the way up to sort of Aberdeen and Banff on the northeastern coast, and which is where all the whiskey distilleries are. So I'm under strict instructions from my husband to go to all of the distilleries. Well, at least one of them. I'm wondering how I can sort of like whisk away mini bottles in my violin case. I don't know how I'm going to manage. Uh, so yeah, I'll be up in Aberdeen for the last bit.
Beautiful. Wow, that sounds like a great trip. How long is it in total?
3 weeks, and it's already looking like not enough. So yeah, I've got a whole heap of my own research to do, but part of being, in the academic world is making connections. So I'm staying with a lot of people who work in the university sector and trying to, make our conversations, well, have conversations about the music that I'm looking at, because it's always in that type of conversation that the most interesting things sort of come to light, when you sort of bring a few minds together. I find it's usually better than sitting for a few days in a library. More, you get more out of it. So
Absolutely. Yeah, you're so right with that. Now, what's happening when you get back? What's happening with Evergreen? Do you have some
Um,
performances and
well,
things coming?
I'm everything like performance wise, everything's been put slightly on hold while I just finish the PhD, because I've set my own sort of end goal as the mid year for doing all the written part. So in the second half of the year, that's when I guess it'll be time to take stock of all of this beautiful music that's been uncovered, and start to reconstruct some programs that can continue to sort of grow the repertoire in Australia, because that's the whole point. And it's I mean, my thesis looks at the historically informed performance practice of Scottish Australian music collections, and it's actually been that historical part which has become the most, I guess, thought-provoking part for me, because um, it's not that usual for people of my generation to think about the history of Australia and how it affects music making in a sort of here and now um, situation. So I've had to learn a lot, first and foremost, about Australian history. and my own history, and then think about sort of, I guess, creative and responsible and intelligent ways of bringing that history to, tune communities, my own performances, programming. They're all such amazing platforms to be able to communicate on a personal level, but also on a sort of a cultural level. And Australia at the moment is going through a really interesting phase of like self-reflection. I find historically we're looking at the past differently. And an idea that struck me at the end of last year is that perhaps Australia won't need to write its own history in the way that a lot of other countries have done. So I know from having lived in France that there's quite a sort of a textbook version of French history. You can sort of, flip through the pages and everyone knows what to expect. When it comes to Australian history, we've tried to do that sort of, but we're so multicultural now, and we have such a growing respect and interest and place for First Nations storylines throughout everyone's lives. For a start, it's impossible to know what version of Australian history somebody might be carrying inside their head when you have a conversation with them or maybe play to them in a concert. And so acknowledging that diversity of history is kind of, it makes it complicated but exciting to play historical music in Australia. You sort of have to weave narrative into your music making to make sense of the music for yourself and for the people who are listening. So that's kind of why I'm getting, interested in visual aspects around the albums or programming, trying to sort of find ways that people can slip into a program without it just all being, funny colonial music that I don't, maybe an audience member would have trouble connecting with. So it's a work in progress, but it's definitely stimulating lots of creative thought because there's no right answer. I don't really know anyone that's sort of come up with the correct way of playing historical Australian music. It's very much a work in progress.
Yeah, and a personal journey as well, as you say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so impressed and so inspired by your work. The scope of what you're taking on is so broad, but you seem to
Pretty
bring it
broad.
together in a
It's
beautifully
not supposed to be that
personal
broad.
way. It's fantastic. Now, Shane, where can people keep up with you? What's the best vehicle? Visiting the Evergreen website, or fill us in on where we keep up with your activity?
Yeah, okay. A little bit of social media and probably my own website and the Evergreen Ensemble website. I promise that it's on the top of my to-do list to update both those websites, because all of the juicy things that I've just been talking about, they're kind of they're hinted at but not fully divulged on the websites. I do try and put snippets out on social media, but it's maybe the terrible and wonderful thing about getting really busy with like research and recording. You don't really have time to self-promote. So
I know, I'm the worst. On any given day, I would much rather be doing it rather than posting about it.
yeah. But yeah, I know that it's an important part of our work as musicians. So I always put out something, a little thing.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
wonderful. Should we finish up with a tune? Do you have
All right.
another little
Yeah.
gem for us?
Let's. What could I play? I think. All right. I'll play this little. It's a hornpipe and reel. I guess you'd call the Highland President a reel. The Highland President, people probably know it's a Scott Skinner tune, and one of the Baileys wrote it down. And the hornpipe is a composition of the Bailey family, and they gave their own bowings for it, which is like 19th century hornpipe bowings from, southern Scotland. So I don't know, it's a lovely tune, and so it's recorded on the Winter Garden album, the one with the tropical foliage, with a pianist accompanying.
Wow, what a great tune.
It is a cracker. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
really good.
it's
Yeah.
really fun to listen to, and I'm sure it's fun to play as well.
The pianist is used to playing, he plays in a Bulgarian group as well. And so at times it really felt like I was being accompanied by Hamid Dulcimer. I don't know what he was doing, but it had Bulgarian overtones.
Oh, cool. Now, when these CDs are out, where can we find them online?
Um, so the Winter Garden one with the tropical foliage, that's going through the ABC. So that will be on all the different platforms. I don't have to take care of that one. It'll be in all of the relevant places, and you can get physical copies through the ABC or through Evergreen Ensemble. The other two will only be through Evergreen Ensemble, and then I'll put up a few streaming platforms, but you'll have to have a look on the website to know which ones. I'm yet to decide.
Okay.
I'm trying to find the best solution for 2023, because it seems as if every year, people have different suggestions as to the best way to sort of give birth to a CD online. What's your suggestion, Chris?
Well, the Bandcamp seems to be the default here in North
Yeah,
America. Um, but I think ultimately it just boils down to where you're going to get the best deal because it's such slim margins everywhere you look. It's becoming increasingly difficult to make it viable financially.
yeah. Uh, I've I only really hear people sort of talking about the best place to access the broadest audience, but any talk of actually, making money, that's actually not even part of the
It's
discussion.
not even in the conversation.
That old thing.
Yeah. But in the meantime, safe travels to you, Shane, and thank you so much for staying up late. So really fun to catch up with you.